Hey Griff, how you doing? Christian Clark here with Null.com. This compressed timeline that you guys have had to operate on, can you just give me some sense of what this has been like from the front office side of doing the draft and free agency and get ready for the start of training camp, all in about a 2 week span here?
Yeah, Christian, it's a great question. It's been it's been almost unimaginable in terms of the marathon of a sprint that it's been, if that's a thing. It feels very much like we've been on full alert and going full speed for longer than I ever have in my career. And at the same time, I feel really comfortable with where we've landed. And we're really excited with everything that we've been able to bring together. And Trajan and his staff on the front office side, and Stan and his staff on the coaching side, we're super excited with how this has all come together, particularly on the floor. We had a very clear theme that we wanted to address coming out of the bubble. We talked about it a little bit before. We wanted to express a higher level of competitiveness as a group. We needed more grit and toughness and more of a defensive identity. And literally every move that we've made fits that theme. There is not a player that we brought in here that isn't about the things that we cared the most about. And everyone we're bringing in here on a human level is the types of people that we really wanted to represent us. And we wanted to represent our fans. So Christian, it's been crazy, but it's been a real blessing as well to get to be part of.
Hey, Griff, this is Fletcher Mackel from WDSU TV. Maybe just following up on that, on specifics, could you maybe just talk a little bit about Adams and Bledsoe? There were reports that Adams was a guy you had interest in last year. Had you tracked those guys for a long period of time, targeted them as guys you really wanted to get, or did it kind of come together maybe a little bit more spontaneously?
So it's funny, actually. It's quite often you hear stories about rumors of players that were wanted by a franchise or franchises trying to acquire players. And most of the time that's untrue. If that was ever said about myself and Steven Adams, it's absolutely true. From the time I had a first draft meeting with him, we had lunch together when he was a prospect in the draft. He's been a player that's been very much at the forefront of my mind in terms of representing what we want our work ethic to be, what we want a team ethos to really be about. Steven's as selfless a teammate and as ferocious as a competitor as there is in the league. And we talked about it today, actually, some of the staff. Steven has a switch that he flips when he walks between the lines, and he becomes a completely different person. And walks across those lines back into living his everyday life. He's as compassionate and as caring a human being as I've ever been with. So it's got a fascinating dynamic there, and something that we're really excited about having in a position, frankly, of leadership with our team. He's a vocal leader. He's somebody that is a native teacher of the game. He's somebody that's already been spending time with Willie Hernan-Gomez by way of example, trying to teach him some nuance that maybe Willie had never seen before. So we're excited about what Steven brings to us, both as a leader, as a playoff seasoned competitor, but mostly as a human being. Relative to Bled, I would say very similar things in terms of the playoff pedigree. He's been a very successful player. He's a two-way player that plays both ends with incredible zeal. He's a guy who, from a competitive standpoint, represents everything that we want to be about. He's just in love with the game of basketball, and he's somebody that every general manager he's been with will share. They just love the guy on a human level, and so that was meaningful to us. But everything he brings in terms of work ethic and approach to the game, again, that's the theme we were trying to bring to the table.
Hey, what's up, Griff? This is Will Guillory from The Athletic. Now that it's officially official, I guess, how important was it to lock down BI to a long-term deal? Just a big picture-wise for this franchise and the trajectory you're trying to, send this team on going forward.
Well, it just doesn't happen very often, Will, that somebody's 23 years old, they have the skill set that he has, and they're just barely scratching the surface of what they can be as a player. We talked about when we acquired Brandon in the beginning, he was something of a late bloomer. He has a body type that is really not filled out yet, and he's going to continue to do so. His work ethic, his work rate, his diligence to taking care of himself and doing the right things off the court is something that really spoke to us. But when we left the bubble, Brandon shared very plainly with Trajan and I, he doesn't intend the playoffs again in his career. And he was taking a position of leadership in this franchise. And that was very, very powerful for us in the form of a young player who represents all the things he does off the court. This is a guy who very quietly has been very compassionate, very involved in his community, giving to frontline workers in his hometown of Kinston, doing things here in New Orleans to feed the hungry. He's somebody that really represents the things that we care about. And his on the court talent is very clear and very evident. And he's just scratching the surface of who he can be. And I think the thing that might be most exciting from a basketball perspective is Brandon knows he's got a lot of room for improvement on the defensive side of the ball. And he really wanted to be pushed on that side of the ball. So I think the synergies that could exist between Brandon, the players that we've mentioned already in Bled and Steven as leaders for our group are significant. But I also think the coachability of those three as our leaders really lend themselves to Coach Van Gundy and his staff, making the kind of impact they want to as well.
Griff, Scott Kushner from the Times-Picayune. Just real quick off the top, I know this isn't really your job, but have you been given any guidance at all with regards to the arena or fans or what you have? And does that affect you guys at all? Then I have one other question after that.
Thank you, Scott. I haven't actually been involved in any of those conversations or any of those negotiations with the mayor and her people, but I know that Dennis Lauscha and the business side are working on that, and hopefully we come to a resolution that allows us to have a decent number of our fans available, because I think this is a team that's really going to speak to them, and I think fans are really going to be proud of who this group is.
And then from just a basketball perspective, this investment in Brandon Ingram obviously speaks volumes. And then you've got Zion Williamson, who's very clearly a part of the future here. How do you think that combination, under an ideal circumstance, how do you think those two pair best? Where do you kind of see them on the floor together? How do you see them, complementing each other? What's kind of, if they're going to be a foundation of this franchise going forward, what aspect of that do you look forward to the most, I guess?
Frankly, I think the human beings that they are one. I mean, it was really meaningful to me. Brandon Ingram does not have a player option in his contract, and he didn't care about that. He wanted to commit himself to this organization for 5 years, and we committed ourselves to him by giving him the trade bonus should he be traded, because it's a sign of our commitment to him that we didn't sign him to use him as anything other than a leader of our franchise. And he didn't sign to be anything other than that leader. And so we're a family here, and it's what we wanted to be. And I think Brandon understood that very clearly. So I would tell you that what I see him doing in large measure is leading this group and helping Zion through sort of the growing pains he went through at the same stage in his career. This is not an easy sport to just flip the switch and be dominant in. And I think he has the ability to help Zion navigate some of the challenges he may face. But in terms of the pairing between the two of them, the thing that excites us the most is sort of what excites us about a lot of our roster. It's the versatility there and the positionless basketball we can play. Both Zion and BI have the ability to be ball dominant and make plays for other people. Bled can do the same. Steven Adams is a terrific passer and somebody who has the ability to make the right read. So we feel like that group, the hallmark of our group, is going to be that we share the ball at a really high level and we take extremely efficient shots. And because both Zion and Brandon can handle the ball in a pick and roll, they can work as a screener in a pick and roll, they can screen away and be used as cutters off the ball, and they're totally willing to do whatever needs to be done to win basketball games. Those are the types of players that if it works out and everybody stays healthy, they can be franchise caliber players on teams that advance rounds into the playoffs. And that's what we're trying to build from a sustainable success standpoint.
Hey, Griff, this is Jim Eichenoff for Pelicans.com. I was wondering the two players that were kind of officially added to the roster today, Hernan Gomez and Gabriel. What did you like about those guys, and what made you want to bring those guys in?
Well, I feel silly. I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record, but those kids are absolutely ferocious competitors. They play the game the right way. They play the game to win. They both have incredible upside. as players. They're both very young, but they've been about the right things. And Wenyen, by way of example, similar to BI, has a body type that's very late blooming. We feel like he's just figuring out exactly what he's going to be capable of, but he does it with a zeal and passion for the game that was significant. And we weren't going to bring in anybody that didn't embrace the game the way that he and Villy do. And we're really just very excited about both players, both in terms of what they bring from a toughness and grit standpoint, but what they bring in terms of their coachability and their selflessness as well.
Hi, David. This is Ollie Cosell with the Bird Rights. Last season, the hope was for the team to be able to hang their hat defensively. Obviously, with Zion and Derek missing a lot of time early, the execution of that vision was practically made impossible. But once the group did find their footing in mid-December and until the pandemic shutdown, Pelicans boasted a pretty good defense, top 10. So with the additions of Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams and hiring Stan Van Gundy, is there a similar expectation?
Yeah, I think we're expecting to make our bones on the defensive side of the ball. And I think people, when they look at our team very, very correctly and astutely, will point out that we're not a team necessarily made for pace and space by itself. We're going to have to let our defense generate a great deal of our offense. I think we have the kind of team that, because we have the sort of unselfish ball handlers we have, that with Steven Adams occupying and boxing out, and the guys we have that can fly to the ball and rebound and hit ahead and start our break, I think you'll see us be a lethal transition team. But all of that's going to start from the defensive side of the ball. And I think Coach Van Gundy and his staff are very committed to that. And it's certainly who he's been throughout his career. Now we've given that staff players that are capable of doing it. You know, in fairness to the staff last year, we didn't have a great deal of continuity. And the injury issue that we were dealing with made it almost impossible to practice on the defensive side of the ball. So once we got to the point where we were able to do that, I think you saw we had some upside there, and we feel like we've added quite a bit to the roster in that regard as well.
Hey, Griff, Doug Mouton at WWL Television here in beautiful downtown New Orleans. The decision to trade Drew Holiday, would you call that a difficult decision? Was it about the value you were getting? Talk about your mindset with that.
Well, I think it was a difficult decision because Drew is such a good human being. He's a good teammate, and he's such a class individual that you want that player representing your organization. I think we also recognize that Drew's timeline might have been slightly different than ours, and building a sustainable future with all of the other assets we secured, in addition to Eric and Steven, made it possible for us to compete at the highest level we can now, but continue to add to the sustainability of our future. And that was really critical. We weren't at a point where we were one player away. We felt like we really needed to lay the groundwork for who we're going to be when we're a successful team. So trading Drew enabled us to achieve that, and it enabled us to put him in a position where he's able to be more immediately competitive on his championship timeline. And that was meaningful to us. Drew had earned that. So if we could move him into a position of that type, it was certainly part of our focus. And as is often the case with a player of his caliber, a player of Anthony Davis's caliber, when we traded Anthony, the best teams are the most interested in those players. So we were really grateful that we were able to put together the package we were, and it just dovetailed well for he and Lauren in terms of what they're trying to achieve as well.
Hey, Griff, Schmidt here from Bourbon Street Shots. You guys are allowed to add up to 20 bodies for training camp. Are you guys continuing to add players as camp opens? And how is that going to look going forward in a season where COVID could potentially take away some of your depth? How do your bodies and depth look like in that situation?
Well, it'd be disingenuous to say I know the answer on the COVID front. It's going to be just something where everybody has to stay nimble and adaptable to the best of our ability. I know our coaching staff is of that mindset as well. We will not start with 20 in all likelihood. I think we'll be more in the range of 18 to start with. We may bring more people in as certain people pass through the protocols, but I don't think it's about the number for us, Schmidt, as much as it's about having the right people here, and the staff is going to be able to adjust and pivot as necessary.
Hey, Griff, this is Ed Daniels at WGNO TV.
Yeah.
When you looked at the games last year, especially in the bubble, did that convince you that you needed more rim protection, or was that a conclusion, sir, that you arrived at earlier than that?
I think what the bubble experience highlighted for us more than anything else is just the overall leadership and the vocal presence from a leadership standpoint, the defensive identity that players bring to the game, and frankly, the overall competitiveness that we were bringing to the equation. It wasn't high enough. And I think what we wanted to do was sprinkle in as many elite competitors as we could. When we met Coach Van Gundy throughout the process, he used that term, elite competitors. And I think it was clear that we were lacking in that area to some degree. So we feel very, very confident that the players we've brought in address that. Certainly Coach addresses that on his front, but we really didn't have enough of a work ethic identity as a group. And so that's what stood out. And as it turns out, the rim protection is going to come along with that, but it's really about the urgency we were bringing and less about specific skill sets.
Will Guillory, go ahead.
Also, I know you talked about Steven quite a bit already, but just the decision to give him the extension, what went into that, knowing that you still haven't seen him with the team at all, and just the deal that you ended up giving him? Just walk us through the process of that.
Yeah, so it was important to us to get the extension done with Steven because, again, he represents culturally what we want to be about. He's a very young player, just 27 years of age, who's still playing very high level with the playoff background that he's had. We wanted him to bring that level of competitiveness to us and bring what he offers as a leader for more than just 1 year. And the way the rules work, if you do it as part of the trade, he can sign the 2-year extension. If we had not done it as part of the trade, he would have had to wait, or we would have had to wait until the end of February. And we really didn't want to take a chance that we got to that point. And he just decided that maybe what he wanted to do was test the free agent market. We would have had far more competition at that point. Once we could land the player we wanted and secure his services moving forward. And we recognized in talking to Steven how excited he was about what we were building. It was sort of a no-brainer to extend him in that circumstance.
Hello, I would like to, my name is Griffin, I'm from Greece. I would like to ask you, last season you played in the bubble, you were close to the playoffs. Do you feel that this season you can make a playoff spot?
We're certainly competing to be a playoff team. We're not going to limit what we're doing in any direction, but we absolutely want to compete at the highest levels. And we believe we've got a group that should be competing for a playoff position. At the same time, I would tell you, very much like last year, the number one goal for us is playing meaningful games. If we end up in a play-in tournament situation, that's fine. We just want to be hardened by winning. We want that to be the focus of what we're doing. And so we very much believe we have the makings of a playoff roster here. But we also recognize we've had incredible amounts of change, and Coach Van Gundy and his staff are going to have the shortest amount of turnaround in league history. So it's hard to build a real identity in the turnaround time we're going to have. So we want to be building towards something meaningful every day. But the results in the short term aren't what we're going to judge it on. It's going to be improvement and the mentality we bring to each day.
Thank you.
Griff, Christian Clark here one more time. When you guys hired Stan, you guys talked about the track record of defensive success. I think his teams have finished, top 10, 8 in his 12 years as a head coach. When you just think about a Stan Van Gundy defense, are there, common characteristics or through lines in the defenses he's coached that you can kind of point to?
Well, I think for one thing, defend the ball, defend your man. Stan's not somebody who historically has schemed a lot of help that can overcome the fact that if you don't keep your guy in front of you, we're going to get scored upon. And he builds a level of commitment and level of, accountability to the defensive side of the ball from day one of everything he's ever done that you can feel in his players. When we played his Detroit team, when I was in Cleveland, we swept them in the playoffs, and those 4 games were the hardest we played the entire time. And it was because literally every member of his team was bought in and was held accountable to keep your man in front. And when that's your prevailing ethos, when that's your mentality from the beginning, you start pretty far ahead of the curve. And so I would tell you, he instills that in people. Their personal accountability is going to be at a really high level. And we feel like we've added some of the right pieces from a player perspective as well. And that'll serve Coach Van Gundy and his staff well.
Scott Kushner again with Picayune. You mentioned positionless basketball a little bit when you mentioned Zion there. You obviously have a lot of guards on this roster. There's a lot of pretty good guards there. How do you envision getting all those guys in? And then with Eric Bledsoe now a part of this, how do you sort of see him collaborating with Lonzo? What does a starting backcourt kind of look like? Just generally your thoughts on that.
Well, I think for one, we envision being able to start Eric and Lonzo, and much the same way that we started Lonzo and Drew. Eric is a similar player to Drew in many areas. I think in terms of the way he approaches the game, there's a little bit of a difference, but they're both very similar in their ability to create off the dribble and to defend. So we anticipate that those two can work very similar together to how Drew and Lonzo worked. At the same time, because we have the versatility we do in the backcourt, we feel like all of those pieces work interchangeably with the others. Well, Nickeil can play with either one of those two and play very well. We feel Kyra dovetails very well with Lonzo and Nickeil. So there's a lot of versatility there that excites us. In terms of how they all get on the court, I think Coach Van Gundy and his staff have their hands full to some degree that way. But these kids are all incredibly coachable, and they all just want to be part of winning. So I don't think they're going to have any difficulty with people being unhappy with their role. I just think the competitiveness of practice every day is going to be maybe an all-time high in my career.
Hey, David, it's Brett Martell with AP. Just want to hear on the fact that I guess going into year 2 for you, every player on the roster is someone that you've had a hand in acquiring, I believe. And I'm wondering how common that is in your experience to happen on that timeline, and how that should be, I guess, interpreted by observers.
Well, I guess it's somewhat uncommon on the one hand. At the same time, we had 2 very high star level players that we traded that brought a great deal of the depth that we have. So it certainly wasn't a plan to completely turn over the roster. It just worked out that way in terms of how we reshaped the roster. But we had a pretty clear vision of what we wanted this to represent. Going back to the day we walked in the door and when Trajan joined up, we had that same vision, which was "Won't Bow Down" wasn't supposed to be a tagline. It's supposed to really be about who we are as a team. This place isn't meant for everybody, and we wanted our team to be one that left an impact on teams. We wanted it to be representative of the city itself. And so we set out to do that. And it just so happened that we ended up turning over the whole group. And I think Zion might have the most seniority right now, which cracks me up. But I think it's just happenstance. It wasn't intentional by any means.
Hey, Griff, it's Andrew from ESPN. You mentioned Zion. Obviously, by committing that extension to Steven Adams, you have a clear plan of those two being able to work together. How do you see Steven and Zion kind of fitting together over the next few years?
Andrew, I'm going to answer your question, but I'd like to point out the flex that Will Guillory is giving you on the shoe collection right now. I think you need to step to the table the next time with a view of your collection. I'm a little bit shaken by the fact that you're losing this battle in this fashion at this point.
That's because I keep mine in a closet like a normal human being. I don't have mine sitting behind me. So
this is going to be the best part ESPN runs. All of the clips on Twitter need to be you two going at it. That's what it needs to be.
That's the only reason.
Say it again, Will.
I'm ready whenever he's ready.
All right, man. No, Andrew, we very much believe Steven and Zion are going to work very well together. A big part of the reason is that because Steven is such an elite screen setter, he can do that on or off the ball. Zion can be used as a cutter away from the ball. He can be used as a ball handler. You know, people, I think, unfairly look at him as a big and being limited to being a 4-5. When we drafted Zion, the thing that excited us the most was the positionless nature of his game. So we really very much envision a time where Zion's going to be playing the 3 and defending the 3, and he's going to be on the handle, and Steven's going to be the one setting the screen. And Coach Van Gundy can address a lot of these things, but can you imagine a double screen set by Steven and Zion? and Zion rolls to the ball, Steven's actually going to be able to make decisions in a DHO and in dribble handoff situations. So we think they can work very seamlessly together. We had lineups with Zion and Derek Favors on the court last year that were among our best and most successful. And Steven can represent that same location on the court in terms of working from the dunker. So I think people put an awful lot of, and I'm one of them, quite frankly, put an awful lot of stock in the ability to stretch the court and shoot from the big position. Not enough is made of the ability to set a physical screen and to make the right read as a passer. And Steven gives us that.
Hey, Griff, Rod Walker with the Times-Picayune. Just going back to Zion again, what are the things that you want to see him make the biggest improvement on going into year 2 of his career?
Well, I think it's hard to really identify the things he needs to make the most improvement on other than his availability. I mean, we're going to need to keep him healthy and let him continue to grow as a player. Everything he did at a historically efficient level. And frankly, I would tell you that it's the things he enjoys the least on a basketball court. And he was historically good at it. So once he gets to the point where he's healthy enough to play his game, play with the ball more, play as a slasher and less of a post-up presence, I think you're going to see the real Zion come to the fore. And that's not a function of his improvement as much as it is a function of his opportunity to stay on the floor and be used in those interchangeable ways.
Great. Thank you very much, Griff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.